15 years ago, my life fell apart. I thought I had finally rebuilt everything, moved on, and left the shattered pieces of my past behind me. But last week, something happened that brought it all rushing back. Out of nowhere, my ex-wife, the woman who tore my life apart with her scandalous affair, reached out to me. 15 years of silence, and now she wants to talk. The email she sent shook me to my core, and even as I sit here trying to put my thoughts together, I can't help but feel like my past is clawing its way back into my present. Back then, I was married to Jessica, a woman I thought was my soulmate. She was everything to me, beautiful, smart, and with a laugh that could brighten even my darkest days. We had been married for nearly 8 years, and I thought we were building something unbreakable. I worked hard, too hard, probably, as a project manager at a growing company, pulling long hours to make sure we could afford the life she always dreamed of. Jessica deserved the best, and I was determined to give it to her. But it wasn't enough. It never was. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there long before it all came crashing down: the late nights she spent with friends, the sudden need for privacy with her phone, the way she started pulling away from me emotionally. It all added up to. I told myself she was just stressed, that maybe I wasn't giving her enough attention. I even started cutting back at work, hoping that spending more time at home would bring us closer again. It didn't. The truth came out in the most humiliating way possible. One evening, I was running errands when I realized I had forgotten my wallet at home. When I walked into our house unexpectedly, I heard laughter, her laughter. It wasn't the kind of laughter we shared anymore. It was different, lighter, carefree. I followed the sound to the living room. And there she was. Curled up on the couch with another man. He was touching her face, whispering something in her ear. And she looked happy. Happier than she had with me in years. They didn't even notice me at first. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, until I managed to choke out, "What the hell is going on?" Jessica's head snapped toward me, and for a split second, there was panic in her eyes. But then she recovered, as if she had been preparing for this moment. She stood up, crossed her arms, and said, "We need to talk." What followed was the most surreal conversation of my life. She admitted everything. The man, his name was Ryan, was married too. They had been seeing each other for nearly a year. "You don't make me happy anymore," she told me, as if that justified it all. "Ryan understands me in a way you never could." She said it so casually, like it wasn't tearing my world apart. I was furious. Devastated. Completely blindsided. I didn't yell or scream. I couldn't even form coherent sentences. I just walked out. For days, I couldn't eat or sleep. When I finally mustered the courage to confront her again, she had already made her decision. "I deserve to be happy," she said, as if her happiness was the only thing that mattered. And just like that, she was gone. The next few years were a blur of pain and anger. I went through the motions, but I wasn't really living. Therapy helped, but it was a long road to recovery. Eventually, I moved on. I rebuilt my life, started my own business, and even found love again, with a wonderful woman named Ellen. For 15 years, I kept Jessica in the past, where she belonged. Or so I thought. Then, last week, I opened my email to find her name staring back at me. The subject line read, "I need to talk to you." I hesitated before opening it, my stomach churning with a mix of anger and dread. The email was short and vague, but it was enough to turn my world upside down. She said she was sorry for how things ended and that she needed to see me. She claimed it was important, something she couldn't explain in writing. I didn't know what to think. Why now, after all these years? What could she possibly have to say to me that mattered? I showed the email to Ellen, who was surprisingly supportive. "Maybe hearing her out will help you finally let go of the anger," she said. But I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what Jessica had to say. Part of me wanted to delete the email and pretend it never happened. But another part, the part that still carried the scars of her betrayal, needed answers. Against my better judgment, I replied. I kept it short, agreeing to meet her but setting strict boundaries. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me or drag me back into her mess. We agreed to meet at a cafe in the city this weekend. And now, as the day approaches, I can't shake the feeling that this meeting is going to change everything. Again. What could she possibly want after all this time? Does she think I've forgotten? Forgiven? I don't know if I'm ready for this. But one thing is certain, Jessica's reappearance in my life has stirred up emotions I thought I had buried for good. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt like my nerves were going to get the best of me. I hadn't slept much the night before, my mind replaying memories I didn't want to relive. As I stood in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting my tie, Ellen gave me a reassuring smile. "You've got this," she said softly. Her words helped, but I couldn't shake the unease growing in my chest. The cafe we had agreed to meet at was a small, quiet place in the city, neutral territory, I guess. I arrived 10 minutes early, hoping to gather my thoughts before facing Jessica. The place smelled of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries, but even the comforting aroma couldn't calm me down. I sat at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance and waited. She walked in 5 minutes late. For a moment, I barely recognized her. Time had softened her features, but the confident air she once carried was gone. She looked tired, worn down, nervous. That was new. Jessica was never nervous. She spotted me and offered a tentative smile before making her way to the table. "Hi," she said, her voice quieter than I remembered. "Hi," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was an awkward pause as she sat down and fidgeted with the strap of her purse. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. If she wanted to talk, she'd have to start. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she finally said, looking up at me. "Neither was I admitted." She sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Thank you for meeting me. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see." "You're not wrong," I said bluntly. "Why now, Jessica? Why after all this time?" She winced at my words but nodded, as if she expected them. "I deserve that. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin. I need to say I'm sorry." I raised an eyebrow. 15 years later, and now you're sorry?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "I know how it sounds. I know I hurt you in ways I can never undo. I've spent years trying to come to terms with what I did, to you, to myself. And I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I needed to tell you." Her words didn't move me. Not yet. I had spent too many nights drowning in the pain she caused to let her crocodile tears undo me now. "Is that it? You just wanted to apologize? Because you could have sent another email." She shook her head. "No. There's." Her voice broke, and she looked away for a moment before continuing. "I made so many mistakes, and I paid for them. Ryan, he wasn't who I thought he was." I scoffed. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No," she said quickly. "It's not about that. It's about." She hesitated, taking a shaky breath. "Ryan left me a few years after we got together. He found someone else, someone younger, prettier, just better. He threw me away like I was nothing. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? She made her bed, and now she was lying in it. For years, I've been trying to rebuild my life," she continued, her voice trembling. "But it hasn't been easy. I lost everything, my job, my home, my sense of self. And I know it's my fault. I know I don't deserve your sympathy or anything else. But I realized I couldn't keep living with the weight of what I did. To you. To us. Her words hung in the air, but they didn't have the impact she seemed to hope for. I felt nothing. Maybe some pity. But certainly not the satisfaction she seemed to think her suffering would bring me. "Jessica," I said, my tone firm. "You reaching out to me now doesn't change anything. You hurt me in ways I can't even begin to explain. And while I appreciate the apology, it doesn't erase the past." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Truly." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "What do you really want, Jessica? Because I don't believe you came here just to apologize. There's something else, isn't there?" Her face crumbled, and for a moment, I thought she might break down completely. But then she composed herself, taking a deep breath. "There is," she admitted. "I need your help." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. My help. After everything she did, she had the audacity to ask for my help. What kind of help? I asked coldly, my patience wearing thin. She hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "It's my daughter," she finally said. "She's sick. And I can't afford the treatment she needs." Her daughter. Of course. I vaguely remembered hearing through the grapevine that she'd had a child after she and Ryan split. Her daughter. I sat there, processing her words, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger, just an overwhelming sense of disbelief. After all these years, after everything she put me through, she was coming to me for help. "I see," I said finally, my voice unreadable. "And you thought I was the right person to ask?" Jessica flinched at my tone, but she nodded. "I know how it sounds. And I wouldn't be here if I had any other choice. I've tried everything, loans, charities, even asking Ryan, but he..." She trailed off, her hands tightening into fists. "Let me guess," I said bitterly. "He wants nothing to do with you." Her lips pressed together, but she didn't deny it. "It doesn't matter," she said after a moment. "What matters is my daughter. She's innocent in all of this. She's only 10, and she's..." Her voice cracked, and for the first time since she walked in, I saw something real in her eyes. Desperation. "She has leukemia," she whispered. "And the treatments are expensive. I've drained my savings. Insurance barely covers anything. I don't know what else to do." I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. This wasn't what I expected. I had prepared myself for a plea for forgiveness, maybe even some attempt to rekindle a long-dead connection. But this? This was something else entirely. "So what exactly are you asking me for?" I said carefully. "Money?" Jessica swallowed hard. "No. Well, yes, but not just that. I need support. I need someone to help me navigate this," and I thought. "You thought I would step in and save you," I interrupted. "Like I used to." She looked down, ashamed. "Not me," she said softly. "Her. My daughter. I don't expect you to care about me. I know I don't deserve your help. But she does. Please, just meet her. That's all I'm asking." I opened my mouth to say something, to tell her no, to tell her that this wasn't my problem. But I hesitated. Because, despite everything, despite the years of bitterness and betrayal, there was still one thing I couldn't ignore. There was a child involved. And that changed everything. A child. Her child. Not mine. Not my responsibility. And yet, I couldn't ignore the weight of her words. I stared at Jessica, watching as she twisted her fingers together, her entire body tense like she was bracing for impact. She knew what she was asking was too much. She knew she had no right. And still, she asked. I let out a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. Meeting her won't change anything. She looked up, her eyes wide with a flicker of hope. I'm not asking you to do anything beyond that. Just, meet her. I hesitated. This was a bad idea. I had spent 15 years keeping Jessica and everything she represented locked away in the past. Letting her back in, even for a second, felt like tearing open wounds that had barely scarred over. But then I imagined a little girl, her daughter, sick and helpless, caught in the crossfire of her mother's past mistakes. And I wasn't sure if I could live with walking away from that. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my temple. What's her name? Jessica blinked, as if she hadn't expected me to ask. Lily. Lily. I could feel my resolve cracking. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of emotions creeping in. You have to understand, Jessica, I don't owe you anything. Not after what you did. I know, she said quickly. And if this were about me, I wouldn't even ask. But it's not. It's about her. Silence stretched between us. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Finally, I sighed. One meeting. That's it. No promises beyond that. Jessica nodded frantically, relief flooding her face. Thank you. That's all I'm asking. I wasn't sure what I had just agreed to. But as I sat there, watching Jessica wipe away the tears she had been trying so hard to hold back, I had a sinking feeling. This wasn't over. Not even close. One meeting. That's what I told myself. That's what I promised. And yet, as I drove to the hospital the next afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking straight into something I wasn't ready for. Jessica had texted me the details early that morning, Lily's room number, the hospital's address, and a simple, thank you, that I hadn't responded to. I wasn't doing this for her. I kept repeating that in my head, like a mantra, hoping it would ground me. The hospital parking lot was half full when I pulled in, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the pavement. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my thoughts. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I got out and walked inside. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit me immediately, mixed with something artificial, air fresheners trying and failing to mask the underlying scent of illness. The walls were painted in soft pastels, an attempt at warmth that didn't quite reach the air of quiet desperation hanging in the hallways. I found Lily's room easily. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear Jessica's voice inside, soft and gentle. Hey, sweetheart, guess what? Someone's here to meet you. I took a breath, then knocked lightly before stepping inside. Lily was small. Too small. She was propped up against a stack of pillows, a thin hospital blanket draped over her legs. Her hair, what little was left of it, was covered by a bright purple beanie, the kind a kid her age probably would have worn just for fun, not necessity. But it was her eyes that caught me off guard. Big, round, and filled with a quiet kind of curiosity. Jessica turned to me with an uncertain smile. Lily, this is, she hesitated. Yeah. What was I supposed to be to this kid? I'm Nick, I said, stepping forward. I forced a small smile. It's nice to meet you. Lily studied me for a moment, then nodded. Nice to meet you, too. Her voice was soft, but not timid. If anything, she sounded tired. Jessica pulled up a chair for me, and for a moment, I hesitated. This felt surreal. I had no idea what I was doing here, what I was supposed to say. But then Lily tilted her head. Are you my mom's friend? I glanced at Jessica, who was watching me carefully. Something like that, I said finally. Lily nodded again, as if that answer was good enough for her. Then, out of nowhere. Do you like dinosaurs? I blinked. Yeah. Dinosaurs are pretty cool. That seemed to be the right answer because a small smile crept onto her face. Me too. Wanna see my drawings? And just like that, the weight in the room shifted. She reached for a small notebook on the tray beside her, flipping through pages of surprisingly detailed sketches of different dinosaurs, raptors, triceratops, even a T-Rex that looked like it had taken serious effort. "These are amazing," I said honestly. "You drew all of these?" She nodded proudly. "I want to be a paleontologist when I grow up. But Mom says I have to get better first." Something clenched in my chest at the way she said it. So matter-of-fact. So certain. As if she had already decided she was going to beat this. I glanced at Jessica, who was blinking rapidly, trying to hold it together. And for the first time since she sent that email, I felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not resentment. Just, the weight of reality. This wasn't about Jessica anymore. It never had been. For the next half hour, I sat by Lily's bedside as she flipped through her sketchbook, enthusiastically explaining each dinosaur in detail. "This one's a velociraptor, but not like the ones in the movies," she said, tapping a drawing with her finger. "They had feathers, you know. Scientists figured it out from fossils and stuff." I nodded, impressed. "I didn't know that. You must read a lot." She grinned. "Yeah. Mom gets me books from the library. I like learning about old things. It's like solving a big mystery." I glanced at Jessica, who was watching our exchange with a strange mix of relief and sadness. "She's always been smart," she said softly. Lily huffed. "Mom thinks just because I'm a kid, I don't know stuff." "I don't think that," Jessica said quickly, shaking her head. I know. Lily waved a hand, dismissing her. "You worry too much." I let out a small chuckle at that. The kid had a spark, that was for sure. But as much as I wanted to stay in the moment, I couldn't ignore the real reason I was here. "Lily," I said carefully, choosing my words. "Your mom told me you weren't feeling well." Her face faltered for just a second before she shrugged. "Yeah. But I'm gonna get better." She said it with such confidence, like it wasn't even a question. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the lump forming in my throat. "I'm sure you will," I said, and I meant it. Lily beamed, then yawned, rubbing her eyes. Jessica took that as a cue. "She gets tired quickly these days," she said, reaching over to adjust the blanket around Lily. "Maybe we should let her rest." Lily yawned again but still managed to flash me a sleepy smile. "Will you come back?" I froze. That was the question, wasn't it? I had come here thinking this would be a one-time thing. That I'd meet Jessica's daughter, say a few polite words, and walk away without looking back. But now, with Lily's expectant gaze locked on me, I realized it wasn't that simple. Jessica wasn't asking me to care. But Lily was. I glanced at Jessica, who was waiting, holding her breath. Then I looked back at Lily and gave her the only answer I could. "Yeah," I said. "I'll come back." Lily smiled, her eyelids drooping. "Okay. Next time, I'll show you my T-Rex." And just like that, she drifted off to sleep. I stood up, feeling something shift inside me. As Jessica and I stepped out into the hallway, she turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded, but didn't say anything. Because I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for a little girl who liked dinosaurs. And somehow, that changed everything. The drive home felt longer than it should have. I had planned to go straight back to my life, shake off the weight of the past and move on like this meeting had never happened. But I couldn't. Lily's voice, her smile, the certainty in her words, it all stayed with me, circling in my mind like an echo I couldn't ignore. When I walked into the house, Ellen was in the kitchen, slicing vegetables for dinner. She glanced up when she saw me, her expression softening. "How did it go?" I hesitated, running a hand through my hair. It was different than I expected. Ellen set the knife down and leaned against the counter. Different how? I let out a slow breath. Lily. She's a kid. A normal, bright, funny kid who just happens to be sick. And she. I trailed off, shaking my head. She asked me to come back. Ellen's eyes searched mine, waiting for the part one wasn't saying out loud. I finally met her gaze. And I said yes. She nodded slowly, processing. Do you regret it? I didn't have to think about it. No. Ellen studied me for a moment before stepping forward, resting a hand on my arm. Then that's all that matters. I exhaled, grateful that she wasn't questioning me, wasn't pushing me to explain the tangled mess of emotions inside me. She reminds me of someone, I admitted after a moment. Someone I used to be. Someone who believed things could always get better. Ellen squeezed my arm gently. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe. But I also knew this wasn't just about Lily anymore. I had spent 15 years telling myself that Jessica was a closed chapter in my life, that I had moved on, healed, left her behind. And yet, here I was, standing in my kitchen, feeling the past claw its way back into my present. I didn't know what this meant. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. But I did know one thing. I was going back. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a mistake waiting to happen. I went back the next day. I told myself I was just keeping a promise. That was all. But as I walked down the now familiar hospital corridor, something in my chest tightened. I wasn't just here out of obligation. I wanted to see Lily again. I knocked gently before stepping inside. She was awake this time, propped up in bed with her sketchbook in her lap. When she saw me, her face lit up. You came back. I smiled. Told you I would. She set her notebook aside and sat up straighter. I saved my best drawing to show you. I pulled up a chair as she flipped through the pages, finally landing on an impressive sketch of a T-Rex, sharp teeth bared in a fierce roar. That's incredible, I said, and I meant it. You're really talented. Lily grinned, but then her expression turned more serious. Do you think I'll ever get to see real dinosaur bones? I hesitated, glancing at Jessica, who was watching quietly from the other side of the room. I think, I said carefully, that's something we can figure out. Lily beamed, satisfied with that answer. Jessica cleared her throat softly. She's been wanting to visit the Natural History Museum for ages, but with everything, it's been hard. Lily sighed dramatically. Mom says I can't go out much 'cause my immune system is bad. Your mom's just being careful, I said. She wants to keep you safe. Lily scrunched her nose. Safe is boring. I chuckled. Yeah, but boring is sometimes necessary. She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. We spent the next half hour talking, about dinosaurs, about books, about anything but hospitals and sickness. And for a little while, I forgot why we were even here. Then a nurse came in, and Lily's energy started to dip. Her eyelids drooped, her small frame sinking into the pillows. You'll come back again, right? She mumbled sleepily. I hesitated. I wasn't sure what I was doing here, what I was getting myself into. But as I looked at this little girl, who had already been dealt a harder hand in life than most, I knew I couldn't walk away. Yeah, I said. I'll come back. Jessica walked me out, silent until we reached the hallway. Then she turned to me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. You didn't have to come today. I know. She nodded, looking down. I appreciate it. I wanted to tell her I wasn't doing this for her. But I didn't say anything. Because maybe, deep down, that wasn't entirely true anymore. I kept coming back. At first, I told myself it was just for Lily, because she asked, because she smiled every time I walked in, because for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to be another person who let her down. But the more I showed up, the harder it became to ignore the bigger picture. The reality of it all. Lily was sick. Really sick. Some days, she was her usual bright, energetic self, flipping through books, sketching dinosaurs, rattling off facts like she had a lifetime ahead of her. Other days, she was too weak to even sit up. Her voice barely above a whisper, her skin pale, her tiny hands trembling when she tried to hold a pencil. Those days hit me the hardest. I wasn't prepared for how much I'd start to care. Not just about Lily. But about Jessica. Not in the way I once had, not the love we used to share, not the life we lost. But in the way you care about someone who's been through hell and still finds a way to wake up every morning and fight. Because that's what Jessica was doing, fighting. Every day, every hour, every second. For Lily. And whether I liked it or not, I was getting pulled into the fight with her. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Jessica and I stepped outside to get some air. The hospital courtyard was nearly empty, the cold evening breeze biting at my skin. Jessica pulled her sweater tighter around herself and sighed. "You don't have to keep coming, you know." I leaned against the railing. "I know." She hesitated. "Then why do you?" I thought about lying, saying something easy like because Lily asked me to. But instead, I was honest. Because I don't know how to walk away. She looked at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw the woman I had once loved, the woman who had broken me, yes, but also the woman who was standing here now, desperate to hold her world together. "I don't know how to do this alone anymore," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Something about the way she said it, so raw, so unguarded, made me forget, just for a moment, all the reasons I should hate her. I exhaled. "You're not alone." She swallowed hard, nodding. "Thank you." Neither of us said anything else. But in that quiet moment, something between us shifted. Maybe not forgiveness. Maybe not understanding. But something. And for now, that was enough. I kept coming back. Days turned into weeks. I had told myself I wouldn't get too involved, that I was just here for Lily, but that was a lie. Whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was part of this now. I sat with Jessica during long nights when Lily's fever spiked and the nurses came in with quiet urgency. I was there when the doctor explained the next round of treatment, when Jessica clutched the armrest of her chair so hard her knuckles turned white. I was there when Lily lost more weight, when she stopped sketching dinosaurs and started sleeping more than she was awake. I was there when Jessica broke down in the hallway, her body shaking with silent sobs as she whispered over and over, "She's just a kid, she's just a kid." And I was there when the doctor gave us the news we had been praying for. Remission. Lily still had a long road ahead of her, more treatments, more tests, more careful monitoring, but the worst was behind her. She had fought. And she had won. The day she was discharged, she held my hand as we walked out of the hospital. "You'll still come visit, right?" she asked, looking up at me with those big, bright eyes. I squeezed her hand gently. "I promised, didn't I?" She grinned, her energy slowly returning, the light in her eyes stronger than ever. Jessica stood a few feet away, watching us, an unreadable expression on her face. Things between us had changed. We weren't lovers. We weren't enemies. We were something else now. Something complicated. Something real. That night, as I sat in my car outside my house, I realized something. 15 years ago, Jessica had shattered my world. And now, somehow, she and Lily had pieced part of it back together. Not in the way I had expected. Not in the way I had ever wanted. But in the way I needed. Life moves forward. And sometimes, so do we.